again, it's Christina from Sunshine and Flora. So this video is part 2 of my most recent Q&A. You guys sent in a lot of really great questions, and in Q&A part 1, I went through all of the questions that were relatable to specific flower varieties. So growing certain flowers, dahlias, storing dahlia tubers, all of those kind of questions. I have sectioned off half of the questions for video 2, and these are more general cut flower farming questions. So fertilizing, succession planting, things like that. My microphone I thought was a little close hitting my neck if I pinned it on my sweatshirt, so I'm just going to set it down in front of me and hopefully you guys will be able to hear me okay. I will try not to ruffle my papers right over the microphone. So anyway, let's just jump into the questions. Actually, before I jump into the questions, I just want to give you a little bit of an update on some other videos that I have coming up. I recently posted a video of myself digging dahlias. I tomorrow am going to be digging all of my Hoophouse dahlias. So I'm going to document that and then show you my method of storage this year. So I will have a video coming up on that hopefully this weekend. So watch for that. All right, let's jump into the questions. First one, can you walk us through succession planning? I grow a cut garden and want to sell bouquets, but I can't seem to get the right timing with fillers and maybe overall quantity of plants per variety. So quantity of plants is always a hard one to guess, and that totally depends on, you know, how much you're selling and where you're growing things. I like to do succession planting, especially with things that are one and done. So a couple fillers that come to mind immediately are cress and buplurum. Those are one and done, and so you want to make sure to plant those, you know, every 2 to 3 weeks, and then you will have a continuous harvest throughout the season. One of the main focal flowers a succession plant are sunflowers. If you grow the pro-cut sunflowers, those are one and done. And so I plant sunflowers every 2 weeks, starting usually the beginning of June. I think this next year I may start to plant some in May just to have some earlier. But this last year I planted 200 to 300 every 2 weeks, and then that gave me a staggered harvest throughout the growing season, all the way pretty much through. I should have planted some later. I kind of messed up my end of the season, but I had them all the way through that biggest market, so the third weekend in September. I should have done yet another planting, and I would have had them into the first week of October, but every year is a learning year. I think I will put on my list a whole succession planting video, and then I can walk you guys through that a lot more in detail. If certain varieties are one and done, like the ones I just talked about, it is very helpful to do multiple plantings throughout the season. One other plant that is a cut and come again that I also find helpful to do succession planting of are zinnias. Zinnias right away, especially the Bennery's Giant, will give you really strong, large blooms. And then kind of as the summer goes towards the end of the season, they get a little bit tired. So I find it helpful to do 2 large plantings of zinnias, and then that just spreads out my strong blooms further into the end of the season. All right, next question. As a beginner, are there books you would recommend about growing cut flowers? Definitely. And I will link all of these in the description below. What are oh, this is a loaded question. Let me answer the books first. I will link these in the description below. Flora has 3 wonderful books that you can order. I have all 3 and they are all great. Lisa Mason Ziegler has the Cool Flowers book. I own that and I reference it all the time. That is another really great one to get. I'm sure there are so many cut flower books out there. Those are the 4 that come to mind. I also have one that's a little more of an inspiration artistic one. It does give a lot of great information, but the images are so beautiful. I can just look through it to get some inspiration, and that is called From Seed to Bloom. I will link all 5 of those books in the description below. if you do not have some of these, I highly, highly recommend purchasing these. Okay, let's go on to the next part of her question. What essentials do you need for seed starting? How do you plan and manage your time when you're starting seeds, when to plant them in the ground, when to expect blooms? Do you need a specific license or permit to sell cut flowers? I do not at my local market in the state of Iowa. Every state or even county or larger markets are different. So I would say you need to go to those specific markets' website or your state website and look that up for yourself. Do you plant seeds in the fall to winterize to get an early start on spring? Okay. Total loaded question. So the very last question, do you plant seeds in the fall to get an early start on spring? I am not this year. However, some zones you can. The Cool Flowers book explains a lot of flowers that you can plant in the fall, direct sowing, to get early blooms in the spring. So I highly recommend looking in that book. The one thing that I did plant in the fall this year to get early blooms this spring is campanula. I planted that in my hoop house. It will winter over and I will have very early blooms in the spring. The other plant that I'm leaving in the ground this year to get earlier blooms in the spring is feverfew. I did this last year and I had really early, really long stems of feverfew and it worked fantastic. So I am doing that again this year. That is also a cool flower. One other flower that works to hold over is Rudbeckia for me. However, this year I ripped all of mine out because I want to start fresh with my Rudbeckia, but that is another really hardy one. Cool flowers, you can start very early in the spring and actually plant before your last frost. So if that's something you want to do, I highly recommend that book. Again, I have it linked down below. Okay, so first part of this question, she's asking, what essentials do you need for seed starting? So you need a seed starting medium, which is different from potting soil. The seed starting mediums are put together different so that it's easy for the seeds to germinate. Okay, someone came in my studio, so I had to go answer the door. I was in the middle of talking about seed starting essentials. So like I said, you need a seed starting medium to start your seeds. You also need seed starting trays to sow those seeds in. I find it helpful to use heat mats when germinating, a lot of those, and I will link some down below that I have ordered. I use a lot of the 10-20 trays, and then you can easily find those heat mats that fit those size of trays. And then you will need lights to put them under, because once those seeds start to germinate, they need light. Now, I don't buy specific grow lights. I buy shop lights from home improvement stores. And you can get these at any of your home improvement stores, you know, Lowe's, Home Depot. I like to get the shop lights that are 4,000 lumens, and those work great for me. So those are the basic essentials that you need for seed starting. There's a lot of videos and books and resources out there where you can read about it. If you're ordering seeds from Johnny's, they give really great detailed seed starting instructions right on the back of the seed packet. And I also have a lot of seed starting videos in my YouTube collection, so you can look up a lot of those for specific varieties as well, and I explain my whole method of starting those varieties. All right, next question. She says, I would love to know what soils, soil amendments, fertilizers, and frequency that you fertilize different plants. This is my first year, and I know weather played a factor also. I ended up with terrible infestation of fungus gnats early, which took out my ranunculus despite using Natural from Gardener's Workshop and using as directed. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I've had trouble with fungus gnats in my seed starting trays, and I get those little yellow sticky traps, which really helps to collect a lot of the ones that are flying around. I will link those down below in the description. But I know there's other things that you can spray and do things that really help for large infestations also. So as far as soils and soil amendments and fertilizers, I will have some of the ones that I use linked down below in my Amazon shop. Some of my raised bed areas I will amend with an organic raised bed mix. I also use composted manure. Those are some of the amendments that I use to top off the soil every year. I also use combinations depending on what the soil needs and what the plants are of like bone meal or blood meal. When When I plant pumpkins specifically in the year, I will use certain amendments, like a lot of compost and manure, and I will throw either bone meal or blood meal in there. I can't remember which is the first one. I think blood meal is the first one because that's nitrogen. And then I moved to bone meal. And then at the very end of the season, I used kelp meal to help the actual pumpkins grow. There's a lot of information on that. And so I experimented with that a little bit this year. One of the other fertilizers that I use for annual flowers and my dahlias specifically is called More Bloom. I got this off Amazon. Again, everything I have linked down below so that you guys can see and read about these specific products, but it's called More Bloom. It's from an Alaska company, and there is fish emulsion in it. And this is what I read that Swan Island dahlias use to fertilize their dahlias. So I use this every 3 weeks to fertilize, and it seemed to work great. So I will probably use it again this next year. All right, next question. How did the new area do with peonies? Pretty good. So if you saw that video, I got those at kind of an odd time, and it was mid-July and super hot and probably not the best time for me to plant those, but I planted them, and I think about 3/4 of them ended up coming up out of the ground. I didn't have drip irrigation set to that area. Probably not the best planning on my part, but most of them are doing pretty good. So those are cut back for the fall, and we'll see how they come up in the spring. But if they do, I mean, that's going to be a beautiful area for those peonies to fill in. Okay, what pumpkins and squash are you going to grow next year, and which variety produced the most per vine? Oh my gosh, I'm going to do a whole video on the pumpkins because I've already planned what I'm going to do for next year. Pumpkins is not my biggest money maker because I have just a small dedicated space for this, but I think it's one of my favorite things to grow. I grow small and medium-sized pumpkin to specifically sell at my end of the season market, and I always almost sell out. This year I had a number left, you know, maybe 20 or so, and I took them to my local farmer's market the following week, sold them all. I grow the smaller size because they're easier to transport at these markets, and other people are growing the bigger ones. I want to grow the smaller ones and some of the more unique ones. I get all of my seeds from the Blue Pumpkin Seed Company, and I have a coupon code that if you guys order from them, you use the code Flora15, you'll get 15% off of your order. Now we're just getting into November, and they are closed for working the month of November. I believe you can still order, and then your seeds will ship in December, which is fine because no one's planting pumpkins right now, but they have over 150 varieties of pumpkins. So many unique varieties. I have my full list for what I'm growing next year, so I will do a whole separate video on that, probably coming up soon, because I have a whole color scheme I'm going for. But some of the most productive varieties that I found were Hooligan, which is a miniature pumpkin, not as small as Jack B. Little, bigger than that, but it's kind of a yellow and white striped pumpkin. So many from one hill. Snowball, which I also saw Laura from Garden Answer grow. That pumpkin is the heaviest producing pumpkin that I have ever grown. It's about this size. It's white, nice long stems. That is definitely a winner. Blaze is also another one that produces very well for me. That's a yellow and orange striped pumpkin, and I always get a lot of pumpkins from that as well. Okay, so moving on to the next question and the second page of questions. This person says, I'm curious as to your 5-year plan. You're obviously already a small business owner, and I myself have been a member of much difficult small business community. I'm always interested in what comes next phase. So I will be going into next spring my 4th season of growing cut flowers, and I can definitely tell that I have grown over the last couple years, which is why buying this neighboring building is really, really going to help. So I have my photography studio that I have been photographing for 20 years, and I am constantly having to change my camera room to a flower workroom. Constantly back and forth. Clean up the dirt, do a photo shoot. And The flowers are just taking more time than they used to, which is great, but I need a dedicated space for that. I would love to start supplying more florists with some orders. I have one that I supply now. There's another one that I really would love to supply. I just never have enough. So I would like to grow my area so that I can make deliveries to 2 or possibly 3 florists. I think I could handle that. The building will be fully renovated and will also house a retail space. I have always just kind of wanted to do that. A few years ago, this is kind of off on a tangent, but a few years ago, I had a friend that bought an old church in a very small town, and she restored it and opened it up to be a store and a coffee shop. And she had vendors bring in items, and then she would just kind of take a commission off of those. And I, at that time, had a Etsy store and a website for newborn props that I would sell. And so she knew I was able to order certain things from wholesale companies like buckets and boxes and bowls, that I sold a few of those for these newborn props. So I ended up ordering like lots of home decor and Christmas items and things, and then I sold them in her shop for a year. It was about 3 hours away, so it ended up not being super feasible for me to like reload everything there once in a while. But ever since I did that, I just found that I really loved doing that and curating collections. And so I think one of the things with this building, which will be in that 5-year plan, will be to have a successful storefront for my cut flowers where people can come in and pick up the blooms and orders. I would like to have bouquet bars. I would maybe like to have U-picks if I get the whole garden area developed. I want to have pop-up vendor markets and special events there. And then I want to have certain retail items that people can buy that are garden related. So I want to be able to sell seeds to people and some fertilizers and flower pots and just garden related items along with the cut flowers. So that is in my 5-year plan for the flower plan, in addition to just selling at farmers markets. Sorry, that was kind of a long answer. Okay, next question. Hi, I have a new greenhouse this year. Can you share how you use it and what helps you accomplish when you are growing plants? Mine is not heated, but does have an exhaust fan. I'm in zone 6B in Pennsylvania. That's awesome. Greenhouses are so helpful. So I am in 5A. I have a greenhouse and I have a hoop house. Neither of them are heated. My greenhouse I basically use in the spring for transitioning my seedlings out into the environment, and then any of my annuals I will put in there to kind of store them before I actually plant them out as well, for like my planters and things like that. I have not really been utilizing it in the summer, which is kind of a bummer. I need to find a way to do that. We are actually going to be moving the greenhouse yet this fall to a different location, so I'm hoping to be able to utilize it more next year, and then where the greenhouse is will become more growing space. It's only a 6x10, but it's going to help me be able to use that grow space much more efficiently. My hoop house has been so useful. I am so glad that I bought that. I'm going to do a whole video on that whole hoop house as well, but it's from Grower Solutions. It's a 16x28. I could have 5 of those, I think. They're absolutely amazing. I thought it was very reasonably priced. It was very easy to set up. It extended my growing season by a month, and I hope that it will extend it a month earlier in the spring. It was so amazing. I have their website linked down below if you want to check them out, but such a great company. It was totally worth it. I grew snapdragons in there, feverfew. I have ranunculus growing right now to see if we'll get blooms. I have stock blooming in there right now. That's where my campanula is planted, and I had a lot of dahlias growing in there. So it has been absolutely amazing. Okay, moving on to the next question. What are the most fun and least fun jobs in the cut flower farming operation? Oh my gosh. Well, weeding is the least fun. I use landscape fabric to suppress most of my weeds, but there are always weeds. And so definitely staying on top of those is the least fun. Also, fighting the pests is not always fun. This year we were in an excessive drought and bugs were worse than normal. We have the corn rootworm beetle, which really eats my dahlias and my zinnias alive. And instead of arriving in August, they arrived in July this year, a whole month earlier. And so that was kind of hard to combat. I did get plenty of flowers and I got it under control, but it definitely tested me. The most fun I find in the winter, seed starting is really fun because you just want to get the garden going when it's cold outside. And so I love doing that. I love garden planning in the winter. And then I love designing my garden space. And then in the spring, getting everything planted, I think is really exciting. As far as being involved in the season itself, I love doing markets. I love doing bigger markets. I think it's so fun to plan my booth and put the arrangements and the bouquets together and actually selling them. That's why I think having this building and retail space is going to be so fun. But yeah, I just love going to markets. Some people like to be a little more behind the scenes and just like to sell flowers to florists and, you know, kind of sell them and move on and just be home in their garden, which I love doing that too, but I really love going to markets. All right, next question. I am still so intrigued by your parking lot conversion to flower growing space. How did you come to this idea? Are you making any changes for next year? Well, I'm basically converting the parking lot into a cut flower garden because that's the only space I have. The space in between the building that is garden is completely full, and now we own all of this extra parking area, and I have one car and it's a huge space. Basically, it's the parking lot that spans 3 buildings. So why not turn it into growing area? It's all that space that is totally unused. So basically we're scraping away the rock, we're bringing in topsoil and creating garden beds, and it's working really, really well. There is one area of the garden that I can tell has been driven on more than others, which is why I have raised beds in that area. The drainage is not well because the ground is so compact. So we do need to dig a pit and fill it with rocks just to help with the drainage because the rock, how it's compacted actually goes down maybe 6 to 8 inches. And so tilling that up, I don't think is a good option. So there is one small area that we need to do that with, but the rest of it is great and it's working great. And this year, the one thing I'm going to change is just adding more beds, and I will make sure to keep you guys updated on that. Okay, can you share what type of equipment you use to film and edit your videos? Any tips you could share about juggling flower farming, flower arranging, and YouTubing? So the equipment that I use to film is my camera that I use for my photography studio. I have a Canon 5D Mark IV and various lenses. This is the equipment I use to take all of my family and senior portraits. So this is the same equipment I use for my YouTube videos. Now I do have a microphone, and I will link this down below. I did have to get this because the sound through just the normal camera is not good enough. I have gone through so many microphones. It's definitely better to get one that's a little more expensive versus the ones that are, you know, $20, $30, even $50. So this is the most recent one I have landed on, and I hope it's working well for you guys. So that's just the basic equipment I use. I edit my videos just in iMovie, and it works really great for me, which came with my Mac. The juggling definitely is the harder part. So I just try to document everything as good as possible for you guys and then put the videos together. I try to be very consistent with posting. I try to post a variety of videos so that you guys don't get bored. If there are any videos that you would like me to do, comment down below. But it's just been a really fun journey, and I hope to continue it, especially with the renovation of the retail space. What are the highest temps that you get in the summer, and does it destroy some flowers? And also, how do you think is best of putting a name out there for selling? So highest temps in the summer, we definitely get into the hundreds in the summer. We also have very high humidity, so our heat index feels a lot warmer. This year, we were in an excessive drought, and so the humidity did not cause me to have powdery mildew. But other years when we get more rain with the high temps and humidity, I do fight powdery mildew a little bit more. A lot of my flowers, I can tell, start slowing down in blooms and the way they look, especially zinnias, by the end of the summer, but I think that's just with everyone's gardens. And then putting your name out there best for selling, I think just start. You know, social media is a good thing you need to definitely post pictures of your own flowers so that people can see what they look like. And while you're growing the flowers, post pictures of what you're growing and kind of tell the story of how you're growing them on your social media that will lead up to you actually harvesting them, because that'll get people excited and let them know that you have this project going and soon you will have blooms and flowers for them. You know, maybe give some flowers away to start to get your name out there. Word of mouth, I think, is the best advertising, because if someone likes something, they're definitely going to tell someone else about it. And word of mouth and direct referrals are definitely the best way of advertising. If you have a small farmer's market or even little vendor shows in the spring or summer, join those. That's a great way to get your name out there, especially in small towns as well. All right, next question looks like it's about pumpkins again. I tried to grow pumpkins with my sunflowers like you did. Unfortunately, I only got 2 pumpkins, needless to say, very disappointing. Wonder if you're going to plant the pumpkins with the sunflowers together again in the same area. Thank you. P.S. So excited for you and your additional location. Thank you. I'm sure it will make it easier for you between your photography and your flowers. Absolutely. So this year, yes, I grew the pumpkins and the sunflowers together. I got a really great harvest, although it was not as big of harvest as it was last year, which I think is for 2 reasons. The first reason, well, maybe for 3. So the first reason is I think I planted them a little bit late, and then we had some weather issues and it stunted the growth. We had like some cold spells, and then they finally got going and it was just a little bit late. The second reason was my sunflowers actually got growing sooner than the pumpkins, and they grew tall and shaded out some of the pumpkins. And so I think that also hindered the growth. And like I said, I have grown them this way for the last 2 or 3 years, and for me, they seem to work fine. However, my pumpkin seed supplier messaged me and told me that he has read that sunflowers actually will give off some sort of chemical or something when they are growing, and it can hinder nearby plants from growing to their full potential. So, because of that, and the fact that my sunflowers were shading out my pumpkins this year, that bed will be dedicated solely to pumpkins next year to get the best harvest possible. And I will be putting in a separate bed specifically for sunflowers so that the pumpkins have their own area to grow and the sunflowers have their own area to grow. Okay, next question looks like a greenhouse question. I see you are in your greenhouse. So this must be commented on that video where I talked about doing this Q&A. Behind you is a broken pane. Is it better to have a glass greenhouse? I suppose the cost is prohibiting. I think I see tape on some panes as well. Does the plexi get brittle over time, and does the wind damage? She is in Canada in zone 5A. So I am also a zone 5A. And yes, my panes are plastic, and yes, I have had a heck of a time with them in the wind. That greenhouse was not the most expensive greenhouse. I will fully admit it. I bought it a few years ago and it works really, really well, but I do have problems with the wind breaking the panes. We will be moving it this year into a little bit more of a sheltered location, which I hope will help. I have been purchasing replacement panes that are the same thickness, but are much stronger, and I have been replacing all of the panes as they break. I also have been using a clear Gorilla Tape to edge everything, and I am finding that that helps immensely, because where the panes slide into the metal part of the greenhouse, they're popping out in big windstorms. And so that clear Gorilla Tape, while you can't really see it, I mean, I can, but not, it's not bothering me. They really are holding those in place. And so I kind of wish that I would have done that when I started, but once we move it, we'll get all the panes replaced and I will put that Gorilla Tape, the clear edging around everything, and I think it should be just fine. I would say if you can afford it, get a glass one right away, because you're probably going to end up spending the same amount of money replacing all of the plastic panes as if you would have bought a glass one to start with. Okay, so looks like just 2 more questions for this video. The first one, after 1 season with your hoop house, is there anything that you would do differently next year with it, such as what you choose to plant in it? Oh my goodness. You know, I have really loved my hoop house this year, and there is not a lot that I would change. I don't know if there's anything that I would change. Let me think about this for a second. The one thing that I did change halfway through the season was my shade cloth. We started with a black 30% shade cloth on the whole thing just to keep down the heat, and shade cloth, from what I am told, will help the stems reach for the light and grow longer stems. It did, but I think that it was just a little bit too much. And so I ended up switching to a white shade cloth that was 40%. And for some reason, switching to that seemed to help. My dahlias got so tall. My snapdragons were much taller after that. So next year, when we put the shade cloth back on in the spring, I'm going to start with the white shade cloth and not even use that black shade cloth. I think I'll use the black shade cloth on my pergola in the garden to shade that area. The other thing I'm changing for next year will just be because I'll be able to put things in there earlier, is planting really early spring crops. Like I'm talking in March to get much earlier blooms. This year when we installed the hoop house, we had to wait for the frost to come out of the ground, and we had a really long cold spring. And so I don't think that I got anything planted in that hoop house till May. This year I want to plant things in there in March, like ranunculus and anemones. I will also already have the campanula in there. So I really, really want to utilize it for the very early spring crops to get a jump start on the season. And then I will be transitioning it to summer crops. I also really liked having dahlias in there this year, and they did really well, but I don't know if it was entirely necessary. So I'm thinking maybe next year I won't plant dahlias in there and I will just have the dahlias all outside in the garden. And I think this year I may try to grow a little corner of vegetables in that hoop house, specifically some tomatoes, just to see if I can get some bumper crops of tomatoes just in one little corner of the hoop house. Overall, the hoop house has been amazing. And like I said, I could have 5 of them. They are just wonderful. Grower Solution actually has a big Black Friday sale coming up, so watch for me to do a post on that. But it's been amazing. If you have room to put one in and want to up your cut flower game, I highly recommend it. Okay, the very last question, and I think this is a very fitting last question for this Q&A. She wants tips that made the biggest difference that helped me level up in growing cut flowers. Well, the hoop house definitely was one, because it extended my season a whole month past what was in my regular garden versus in the hoop house. I still have things growing in there. We have had hard freezes. It is November and I still have things growing in there. My snapdragons look amazing. I have ranunculus starting, and like I said, those campanula are going to overwinter. So if you want to up your game, invest in a hoop house. One other thing that I think is super important is making sure you have your plants staked properly. The first couple years, I lost a significant amount of blooms because I was not supporting and netting my flowers. This year, I was much more diligent when putting out the Horta Nova netting. I'll link it down below, to net things like, Snapdragons was a main one. Bells of Ireland. There are so many that I put the Horta Nova netting on. Without that netting, I lost significant blooms the year before. So if you want to harvest the most blooms as possible with really straight stems, you definitely need to put netting on. A lot of the fillers require netting, like bupleurum and cress. I wouldn't be able to get straight stems without those. The other thing that I really did to get as many blooms and as much income as possible is to make sure you're spanning your growing throughout the entire season. So I start very early in the season with the ranunculus and anemones, daffodils, tulips, then I move into peonies, and then you move into some of the other spring flowers like snapdragons. Then you grow for your summer flowers. Into September are the dahlias that go into October. I added pumpkins for extra income, and then the hoop house extends the season all the way through October and right now into November. So you really want to up your game by extending your season and making sure that you are growing all the different varieties so that you can span as many months as possible. Okay, so that does it for all of my questions in this part 2 of the Q&A. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was informational for you guys. Like I said, I have a couple more videos in the works, how I'm storing dahlia tubers, which I know a lot of you are doing right now, so I should have that up this weekend. Tomorrow I'm digging my hoop house tubers, and then I will be storing them, so you should see that video probably Saturday or Sunday. I'm also going to do, well, hold on, let me grab my list of videos that I'm going to be sharing with you. Here's a few that I just have written down that I want to share with you guys. I want to go through some of my failures of the season because I know we can all learn from that. I want to do a market recap for the season. I want to do a whole hoop house video for you guys. And then going into winter, of course, I always do a full video where I share all the varieties of seeds that I'm ordering and what I'm growing for next year. Very soon, I'm going to be doing that pumpkin video for you guys on what I'm growing next year. And then I also will be sharing my entire garden plan for next year for layout and what I'm planting where. That'll be a later video, but I always like to share that with you guys. And then I'll be sharing all of the updates with our renovation. Currently, we're waiting on the engineer to do the drawings. Then we'll get the contractor in to kind of make the plan for how we're going to fix the foundation, which I haven't even shown that to you guys yet, but that'll be in an upcoming video too. So anyway, stay tuned for lots. Hope you're having a great day. We'll see you soon.